want the mic?
I just need to get a place to hook it.
We do have the handheld if you would.
Oh, but it sounds great. I was asking if you wanted.
Oh, no, I'll just scream my head off. People are used to that from me. Yeah. All right, good evening, everyone. Show of hands, how many Jayhawks in the room tonight? All right, rock chalk. Good to see. And I'm sure we have a lot more Jayhawks joining us remotely, watching from home too. So good evening and welcome to the Watkins. We appreciate you all coming out to join us on this chilly evening. We are honored to host two excellent authors for a program in connection with our exhibit, Jayhawks versus Tigers, exploring the history of this historic college sports rivalry. And I see somebody in the audience who had a hand in that very exhibit. So if you have any questions about the exhibit, feel free to ask my colleague Andrew, who's in the audience tonight. We'll stay open for a little bit after the speaking portion of tonight. So those of you who would like to check out the exhibit on the third floor, you're welcome to. But it will be on display through March, so you have a lot of time to come check it out. After tonight's speaking event, we encourage you to buy copies of the books and have them signed by the authors. And I'm sure the authors won't mind me reminding you all that books make great holiday gifts.
The best.
They make the very best holiday gifts, it's true.
And if you buy me lunch, I'll meet you anywhere to sign a book.
Excellent, excellent. Merchants, here we come.
Yeah, that's right.
Rebecca, is it
Osier.
Osier Schulte, graduated. Schulte, my bad, yeah.
And I go by Becky. So.
All right, Becky Schulte graduated with a BA from KU in 1976. She's the former University of Kansas archivist and a career Jayhawk. She has served in various positions within KU libraries, from student assistant to curator of the Wilcox collection of contemporary political movements, to 18 years as university archivist. So please join me in welcoming Becky Schulte.
Hi, everybody. Glad you're here. Very nice to see you all. Before Kansas had a Jayhawk, there were Jayhawkers. Reference to what may be the earliest use of the term Jayhawker can be found in Encyclopedia of Kansas History from 1912. The entry describes men known as Jayhawkers who made their way through Death Valley in 1849. One of these Jayhawkers was William Lewis Manley, who relates his experiences traveling from Illinois to the West. He describes the origin of the term Jayhawker as it applied to his group of men intent on reaching the California gold fields. According to Manley, his party traveling through what will be Nebraska decided that they needed a name, and then and there they dubbed themselves the Jayhawkers. I think they viewed hawks flying through the air and commanding the skies. They're never really clear about, where the term comes from, so that's my idea. The origin of the term Jayhawker, used in relation to the state of Kansas, is found in histories of the Kansas territorial era, which was 1854 to 1861. In 1856, before the start of the Civil War, there were bloody skirmishes along the territorial border as raiders from both Kansas Territory and Missouri moved back and forth across. It was at this point in time, when violence was increasing, that stories about the origin of the term Jayhawk in association with Kansas began. There are several accounts crediting Patrick Devlin, an Irish immigrant, with the origin of the term. 3 Kansas counties along the Missouri border claim to be where the word Jayhawk was first used: Miami, Lynn, and Bourbon. All told stories about Pat Devlin, which I thought was very interesting. In the Osawatomie, Miami County version, before the sun was up one morning in the fall of 1856, a Free Stater named Pat Devlin was seen riding into town on a well-loaded mule. A neighbor remarked, "Pat, you look like you've been on an excursion." Pat answered that he had been jayhawking. Asked for an explanation, Pat said that he had been foraging off the enemy, and that in Ireland, a bird called the jayhawk worried its prey before devouring it. From this incident, we have the now familiar name of the Jayhawker. Whether there really was such a bird in Ireland was one of the legends that I tried to confirm. And as it happens, my luck does sometimes confirm. I had an unforeseen advantage. My editor from the Press of Kansas, her partner, Reggie Walsh, is Irish. And he told me that there is indeed a word in the Irish language, Jayhawk, which is spelled S-E-A-B-A-C. And that when spoken does sound like Jayhawk. I searched and did find the word in an Irish-English dictionary, and there are several meanings: a hawk or falcon, a hero or champion, a nobleman, a sparrowhawk, and a phrase using the word that means when the warriors return raging from battle. Sounds pretty good, right? So I'll take it. Several men fighting on the Free State side did adapt the term Jayhawker to describe their soldiers: James Montgomery, Senator James Lane, and Dr. Charles Jennison. This is Charles Jennison, dressed in his very elaborate Western gear. He sought to gather a group of volunteers together. So he posted a sign: Independent Kansas Jayhawkers were needed. Volunteers for the 1st Regiment of the Kansas Volunteer Cavalry to serve our country during the war. He adds that horses will be furnished by the government. In addition to Jennison, another man stepped forward to lead, and he may be more familiar to you all Lawrence people. James Henry Lane, who was almost killed in Quantrill's raid on Lawrence, became a U.S. Senator in 1861. He served as general of Lane's brigade and the 1st Kansas Colored Volunteers. Here he is, complete with rifle and top hat. Perfect outfit for battle. The first use of the word Jayhawk in association with KU that I was able to document was the creation of our now famous, world famous yell, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, KU. The year was 1886, and Professor E.H.S. Bailey of the Department of Chemistry decided that the chemistry department needed a yell. During that era, colleges, classes, and clubs all needed yells to proclaim spirit and show unity. Here is Dr. Bailey in his essay explaining how and when Rock Chalk came into being. A very important event. This page is from the 1917 Jayhawker yearbook that was actually dedicated to the Rock Chalk yell. And here is a page from the Oriad, which was the KU annual of 1899, with class yells for 1899, 1900, 1901, 1902, and the KU engineers. My favorite is the class of 1900. We know it all, we can't be taught. Rock Chalk Jayhawk, class of naughty not. Yeah, that was good. Less than 5 years after the Rock Chalk yell connected the word Jayhawk to the University of Kansas, KU's athletic teams have become known as Jayhawkers. And during the first decade of the 1900s, drawings of Jayhawks began to appear in publications specifically about KU football. In this cartoon from the 1908 yearbook, a pterodactyl-like Jayhawk sits on a goalpost, tackling at a very woebegone Missouri Tiger on the ground below. Perfect for your exhibit, right? The tiger's tail is in knots, with the dates of KU football victories against Missouri displayed on tags for everyone to see. So yeah, you can see the tags. These early Jayhawk and Missouri Tiger drawings were printed on the program for the annual KU Missouri Thanksgiving football game in Kansas City on November 21, 1910. So another Jayhawk, very big feet. Remember, this is before Malloy's Jayhawk had come along in 1912. The next day's issue of the Kansas City Journal carried an imaginative cartoon. A turkey is shown perched on top of a post to which both the Missouri Tiger and the KU Jayhawk are tied. The tiger says, "Gee, wouldn't he make a fine feed?" The turkey says, "You fellows will have to wait another year now." And the Jayhawk says, "And I was figuring on getting a big turkey dinner." The game ended in a tie, 5-5. You know, you wonder what kind of football games did they play, you know, in those days. You know. So now I'm moving on to the signature Jayhawks that we all know. This is a senior picture of Daniel Henry Malloy from the 1914 Jayhawker. Hank was the maker of the iconic 1912 Jayhawk, the first designated signature Jayhawk. Here is the first Jayhawk cartoon drawn by Hank. It appeared in the UDK on October 28, 1912. The Jayhawk, complete with his tag, so that people would know it was a Jayhawk, is preparing to kick the Kansas State Agricultural College, now Kansas State, Aggie's hound dog. And he had explained that he first put boots on the Jayhawk so it could kick the hound dog. But even though it was drawn first, it was not the first Malloy Jayhawk to appear in print. That honor is claimed by this cartoon that appeared 3 days earlier in October 25th. That Jayhawk is drawn shooing away the Jinx, a small cat-like creature that was blamed for football losses and other calamities. The caption under the cartoon reads, "Jayhawk suffers attack of Jinx at Des Moines." Hank Malloy continued to draw his Jayhawks for many years, retaining his contact with KU. The November 1971 issue of the Kansas Alumni Magazine was a celebration of Malloy's life. This is Malloy riding bikes with Big J. Despite his age of 79, Malloy was known to ride everywhere in Lawrence. Sadly, Hank died just 2 weeks after this issue came out. Now we move to the 1920 Jayhawk. Information about the somber bird perched on the KU monogram, identified as the 1920 Jayhawk, was hard to find. I finally discovered it first in print in the September 1921 issue of the Alumni Association's Graduate Magazine. This bird may have been designed by a member of the magazine staff. That was never explained. It was also used in advertising, such as this ad that appeared on the back cover of a 1922 football program. The next Jayhawk to step onto the KU stage was the quaint duck-like bird, drawn by 2 sophomores, James E. O'Brien and George Hollenberry, just before the KU-Nebraska game in 1921. Inspired by KU cheerleaders at a pregame football rally, they immediately returned to O'Brien's home at 1109 Ohio and started work. O'Brien drew the bird and Hollenberry was designated as the sales manager. Once they had their design, they charged money to paint it on the side of student jalopies going to the game in Nebraska. And here are their senior pictures that appeared in the 1924 Jayhawker. And a variant of that 22 Jayhawk was produced as an applique. This probably came out in the 20s. In 1929, the Jayhawk Club of Kansas City commissioned the next Jayhawk. Their version appeared in print for the first time in an October 11, 1929 Kansas City Times article. It was drawn by Maclay Lyon Jr., the son of the secretary of the club, Dr. Maclay Lyon, a KU graduate. Oddly enough, the son was actually a graduate of the University of Missouri. His father asked him to repress his Missouri spirit long enough to create a Jayhawk who was militant, rampant, rambunctious, and aggressive, as he certainly is. Note that this is the first appearance of spurs on his boots. A slightly different version of the 1929 Jayhawk was copyrighted by the Fritz Tire Company of Lawrence and sold as appliques. The 1929 was very popular among KU groups. These cheerleaders wearing them on their sweaters, and this photo was probably taken in 38. The next bird to be chosen as one of the 6 Jayhawks also displayed a fighting spirit. Drawn by Gene Varner Yogi Williams during the summer of 1941, this Jayhawk was as militant as the 1929, but a bit more refined. His Jayhawk warrior, as he was sometimes called, was also featured on the 1943 University calendar, with drawings of his less militant Jayhawks inside. Isn't that silly? there's 12 of these drawings of this silly little Jayhawk with guns and tanks and interesting, yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is a picture of Yogi from the fall of 1946. And here is a decal of the 6th and final signature Jayhawk, known as the Happy Jayhawk. He was drawn in 1946 by journalism student Harold David Howe Sandy. Writing on the origins of his Jayhawk in 1971, Sandy noted that Ed Brown, head of KU's public relations, approached him and suggested that he design a Jayhawk that was not ferocious. Peace had come, and the university was looking for a less warlike Jayhawk to represent KU. Like Jayhawk artists before him, Howe printed decals of his mascot, which he sold for 95 cents. You can still see the price sticker there on the side, to help fund his college education. He paid $25 to copyright the design, but allowed the university bookstore to use his Jayhawk for advertisements. In 1948, he sold the copyright to the bookstore for $250. Not a very good business move. And the next 2 makers are not a part of the 6 Jayhawks, but I felt like they should be recognized nonetheless. This is Dick Bibler, who arrived on campus in the spring of 1946 after serving in the military. This is his recognition page from the 1947 Jayhawker. You can see one of his Jayhawks in the bamboo cage. See down here on the lower left. And here's another one of his drawings. This is the Fighting Hawk of 50. We have the original drawing in the archives. Most of these are printed, but this is an original drawing. And this is the recognition page from the 1951 Jayhawker for Paul Coker Jr. He was born in Lawrence and enrolled at KU in the fall of '47 as a fine arts major. After he graduated, Coker continued to be a prolific cartoonist. In 1961, he began working for Mad Magazine, eventually illustrating more than 375 articles. He was also this is very good, became a production designer on more than a dozen Rankin Bass television specials, including Frosty the Snowman and Santa Claus is Coming to Town. How many times do we watch those cartoons?
Yeah.
A million. And there is a fact that not many people know. He also drew the Chesty Lion, the official mascot for Lawrence High. In 2005, the university updated Hal Sandy's Happy Jayhawk as part of an effort to strengthen KU's visual identity. The sans serif KU was changed to more closely resemble the Trajan font used in KU's logo. Did you all know that? You know that, yeah. The long leg on the K is said to represent the hill on KU's campus. Despite the fact that KU had identified there are now 7 standard Jayhawks, student creativity could not be stopped. Probably the best source for more Jayhawk drawings is the yearbook. Here's a page from the 1910 Jayhawker, which shows a very scary Jayhawk writing a column called Jayhawk Talks, which is a sort of a tell-all campus gossip news feature. In 1915, this crow-like bird appeared. In 1917, which remember was dedicated to the rock chalk Jayhawk yell, is full of these little bluebirds. And here are some very colorful pages from the 1920s. I could do a whole presentation on just the yearbooks. They're so amazing. In the 1930 yearbook, a very different style of Jayhawk appeared. No more cute little birds. This is Mercury, which took me a little while to figure that out. He's got wings on his hat, wings on his boots. And he is riding on a stallion, looming over a Jayhawk who is attacking a wildcat. And then here's one with Mercury and the 4 different Jayhawk classes, from the freshman with a beanie to the senior with a crown. And there are more of these drawings. And then over the years, many Jayhawk mascot costumes have been created by KU fans and even opponents before the university settled on the official versions. Like it? Why don't we go with this? What's wrong with this? You know, it's easy, trash bag, that's all you need. This was taken at the halftime of the Oklahoma KU football game in Oklahoma City in 1910. Kansas won the hard-fought battle by a score of 2-0. You know, what kind of football is that? Really interesting. And here is another early mascot. He made an appearance in 1914 on the University of Nebraska football field. This Jayhawk had apparently been stolen from KU at the KU-Nebraska game in Lawrence the year before. After the 1914 game, the UDK ran a story, "Huskers produce stolen Jayhawk," acknowledging that the Jayhawk had been swiped by Nebraska the year before and paraded around the field at the next game in Lincoln. This photo is from the Nebraska Cornhusker yearbook. And in a photo montage titled "Up in Nebraska" that appeared in the 1922 yearbook, there is a photo of a very strange looking bird. Can you see it? Yeah, up there in the corner. There's a close-up, very fuzzy, but there he is. Imagine falling down in this costume. In an article published in the UDK soon after the game in 1921, it was reported that between halves, a huge black Jayhawker pranced out on the field and was attacked by an alleged football player who swung a mean battle axe and succeeded in decapitating the Kansas bird. After the death, the NU rooters pulled that distinctly original burial scene with the slow music, mourners, and all the rest of the trimmings. So you can see how the head could have just blown off. It's kind of, you know. It wasn't until the 1950s that the KU Alumni Association commissioned the creation of the first official mascot costume. The body was made of chicken wire covered by a plush fabric, and the eyes were special because they lit up when KU made a touchdown. Why don't we do that anymore? Named Jayhawker, the mascot first appeared on October 3rd, 1953 at the KU Iowa State football game. The costume underwent changes every time a new one was produced. Years later, we have a very different looking mascot, as this little girl rides on his tail at a 1971 basketball game. And then here is another Jayhawk to be introduced. Does anybody recognize what this is?
Baby J.
Baby J's egg.
Oh.
Yeah. So being pulled out on the field at the 1971 KU State homecoming game. So baby's now hatched. She's being held down by a couple of fraternity brothers. And is greeted by Chancellor Loris Chalmers. There he is. Baby J was the brainchild of Amy Hurst, a sophomore from Madeira, Ohio. She met Dick Wintermont, the Alumni Association president, near the end of her freshman year, and told him that she wanted to build a small Jayhawk. Wintermont told Amy that if she built it and they liked it, she could wear it. So she went home to Madeira for the summer and built a Baby J in the family garage with assistance from their next door neighbor. So here's a series of slides. Here's, the first we had the chicken wire, and now I guess this must be paper mache, I'm not sure, but getting a drink. And here is her mom, who would probably die if she knew that this picture was being shared around the world. So she's putting the plush on the body. And then now we have a beak. Now we're getting eyes. And there we are. And here is Amy and Eldon Pruitt, who was Big J at that time. And they're on the cover of the KU Missouri game. I didn't really plan all these Missouri, it just worked out that way, really, on November 20, 1971. As we worked on the book, more than 1,000 unique Jayhawk images were discovered in all sorts of places in the university archives. And some of them were very interesting images, like this one. This is Harold Goss, who is in his P-47 Thunderbolt with a Jayhawk painted on the engine cover. And he said that he wanted a fierce Jayhawk with a 500-pound bomb under his wing. It's kind of hard to see, but it is there. And here's some other Jayhawks that are located around here. Does anybody recognize where these are?
Union.
Mm-hmm. Floor of the Union. And I'll just do a little plug for my daughter. She was my official photographer on the book. She even got up early, which she hates to do, and drove with me around Lawrence and to other locations. And does everybody know where this one is?
KU.
Yeah, you got a Jayhawk Tower. There you go.
Yeah.
And how about these guys?
Yeah.
The wheel. He knows that.
So I've heard.
Did you sign your name on any parts there? The prize for the most far out Jayhawk can be given to KU grad and astronaut Stephen Hawley, who flew during the 95th launch of the space shuttle in July 1999 and carried a KU t-shirt. And so for my final slide, I have the resting place for where dead Jayhawks go. This is
Retired.
retired Jayhawks, yeah. This is a storage area in Spencer Library. They get brought out every once in a while for special events. But we have lots of body parts now.
There's one of them, a couple of them in the Union on display.
Right. Yeah, the original Baby J is now in the Union. And
Centennial.
One of the old.
he's also with the Centennial Jayhawk who they built in 2012 because there had been no 1912 mascot, costume. So they built one for his, and they call it the Centennial. Yeah. So any questions at this point?
Why were spurs added to the Jayhawk's feet? Was that just to make it a more realistic looking bird? Or?
Yeah, to make it
Okay.
more vicious,
Okay.
ferocious.
Yeah.
They were tired of these goofy
Mhm.
Jayhawks with, doing silly things, and so they decided they needed something a little bit more ferocious.
Which one is your favorite?
My favorite, which everybody says this, is the 1912.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Because to me, he is able to, if you read the book, you'll see that with just a little squiggle of his mouth, Hank Malloy was able to convey all kinds of emotions on this Jayhawk. And he was also able to, do all kinds of things like kick the K-State hound dog around. And the other ones seemed sort of stiff to me, especially the 46.
Mhm.
They sort of stopped being fun, at that point. Got frozen in time.
You gave some examples of how what was happening in the world sort of inspired an adjustment in form.
Yeah.
Did that hold throughout?
Yes, it did. That's also in the book, if you buy the book, but they had drawings of, like sailor Jayhawks walking around on campus. There were, let's see, what was another one? I can try to remember what he was called. I'm blanking out on it. But Malloy drew hippie Jayhawks. That were, marching around with flowers in their, I guess their hair, sort of. And it was interesting to, spend that much time, over 100 years, going through KU history. Because that's what it really does, is it takes you through the history of KU from 1865, even before, the campus was established. And I think the most recent photos I had were of the football game in, let's see. I got this thing off, tell me. It was for a bowl game, our last bowl game. Dominic, you were at that game. Yeah. Memphis. And the Jayhawks are in the parade dressed as Elvis. So those were the most recent ones I think I had. But those were good. When I found those, I was like, yes. Okay, maybe Curtis, your turn.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
I'll unhook you.
Okay, next we'd like to introduce Curtis Marsh. Curtis has devoted over 35 years of his life to KU. He may be enjoying that statistic less every year, I'm not sure, but including being a student, working as the director of KU Info. I believe he's worked for KU Endowment as well. He's also the author of KU Euphoria, which was one of the Raven Bookstore's 10 best-selling books of 2023. So please join me in welcoming Curtis Marsh. Actually, I just realized you may not want the retired Jayhawks on the screen, so why don't you put on something a
That's
little
up to
more
you.
pleasant in the meantime.
Yeah.
Any picture of a Jayhawk is a pleasant picture.
Exactly.
I have developed an obsessive, medically challenging notion that KU is the best school in the universe. That gives me many opportunities to talk with folks about our history, our traditions, and how eminently appropriate it is to spend several minutes on the Jayhawk itself, while we are focused on the spirit of the Watkins Museum's exhibit. Any discussion about the rivalry between KU and MU can be finished in, I think, maybe 10 seconds by simply saying, well, we were on the right side. It's as simple as that. But the discussion of the Jayhawk, the discussion of the Tiger, and so many other elements, not just athletic, help us really understand this unique rivalry. And one of my favorite mascot-focused discussions when it comes to KU and MU is the notion, or actually the question to the audience, what other universities have the Jayhawk as their mascot? Does anyone know? Zero. Zero universities, and interestingly enough, there are some other schools whose mascot is the Jayhawk. That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
A whole nother discussion. But then I asked the audience what they would imagine as the country's most common university mascot. That's a very good guess. Do you have any other guesses?
Bulldogs.
That's a very good guess from the person who already knows. Any other guesses?
I don't know. I'm guessing.
It's a good guess.
It's a good guess.
That is another good guess. So of course, this educated and intelligent audience comes up with the three most common mascots. Ironically, the bulldog is number one. And also possibly a discussion for another time, the perspective that we need to build when we're talking about mascots. We're talking about schools that were creating these images 100 or more years ago, when perhaps the mascot was simply something you brought from home and hoped that you would win the game, and if you did, you better bring it to the next game too. So the bulldog is rather common, potentially because of that simple fact. Someone brought their dog from home and helped their team win. What, if anything, was the mascot at the University of Kansas before it was the Jayhawk?
Bulldog.
The Bulldogs. So we are that close to being just one of these schools, like 40 to 50 other colleges and universities that have the Bulldog as a mascot. And there are pictures in Becky's book of the KU Bulldog. So thank goodness we had this wonderful story about being on the right side of abolishing slavery and maybe doing some warlike things in the meantime. We were not angelic in our work towards abolishing slavery, but Missouri was less angelic. And so Wildcat and Tiger are number 2 and 3. And there are many arguments to placing different mascots in different orders. There are an awful lot of bears, but they seem to be the golden bear, or the this bear, or the bear cat, or the, so that doesn't count. But Wildcat and Tiger are number 2 and number 3, which if you bring anything back from my time with you, please let folks know you are a fan of the university with a truly unique mascot, and our 2 primary rivals have the 2 most boring mascots in the country. So, I mean, that's all we really need to know about the KU-MU rivalry, but there really are some lovely stories about the history between the 2 schools. And Becky actually helped me. She and I did a co-presentation for the Kansas Book Festival last year in Topeka. But the beauty of having her go first is that you mentioned several things that lead me to some fun stories about KU versus Missouri. This book, as is the case with Becky's, is not all about KU-MU, because another element of our rivalry with both MU and the folks to our west is that they seem to really be kind of focused on how they wish they were better than us. So a book about KU history and KU traditions only has a little bit of stuff about Missouri and about K-State, but enough to remind us how much better we are. In one of Becky's pictures It showed 4 Jayhawks under Mercury, and the 4 Jayhawks represented freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. You can't answer this one. What was the freshman Jayhawk wearing?
Beanie.
Awesome, you were really paying attention. So this is one of my favorite stories. It is a KU traditions story that does not necessarily have to do with athletics, although I am a big KU athletics fan, and lots of lovely KU stories are focused on our athletic history. But as a freshman, for at least 2 decades, you were paraded over to a table where an upperclassman issued you your freshman beanie. And keep me honest on this one, actually there are several people in this audience that know so much about KU, it makes me nervous. However, I'm going to go ahead and you call me on it. So if you were caught on campus as a freshman without your freshman beanie on, there were consequences. The kinds of consequences that we are very focused on not doing these days. They may have called it hazing. Regardless, freshman beanie to be worn on campus by the freshman class anytime they were there, and they got in trouble if they were found without it. I would like to talk a little about what I think can be a tie. Becky and I don't agree on this one. I think the best Jayhawk has to be the current Jayhawk. And I expect and accept argument on that fact. But I think that a Jayhawk that lasts 80 years, primarily unchanged, and has now become, biased opinion, probably the most recognized college mascot in the country. You got to show that Jayhawk love, and perhaps the 1912 and the 1941 Jayhawk would be considered number 2 by many people. That would be a pretty solid argument. One of the chapters in my book is titled The 4th Coolest Jayhawk. and I say it that way because number 1, at least in my book, is the 1946 Jayhawk. Number 2/3, a tie between 12 and 41. You already offered the story of the 1923 Jayhawk, which if you get either or both books, it will talk about the very unique story about how that one was invented, birthed, born. It was indeed these 2 students. As I understand it, they were trying to get enough money to go to the Nebraska game, and they literally painted these Jayhawks on students' vehicles. Again, in this continuing theme of perspective, holy cow, you're not going to be painting Jayhawks on people's cars nowadays. But back in the 20s, back 100 years ago, these fellows earned money and also created decals, or what did you call them? Appliques. I have one of those from 1923.
Oh, cool.
So back to the beanie story. This is where we leave the KUMU theme for a moment. I'll get back to it. But the freshman beanie, which was a tradition on campus, fast forward to 1946. World War II has ended. Many students delayed their college experience because they were either fighting in the war or they stayed home to help their families through whatever challenges they were facing because of World War II. The Office of Research and Planning, OIRP, there's an I in there. In any case, the data that shows us the enrollment numbers for each year at the university says that enrollment dipped during World War II to the point that there were only 2,700 students attending in 1945. The war ends, GI Bill, people decide to come to college because the war's over. 1946 enrollment was 9,000 students. We more than tripled our enrollment. That would be like next year, 100,000 students coming to KU. There weren't enough teachers. There weren't enough classrooms. There weren't enough living arrangements. And many of you have heard the story that they actually created some living quarters under the bleachers of Memorial Stadium for these students because there simply weren't enough resources for them. But please keep in mind, many of these first-year students, and I think you can call them freshmen, many of the freshmen in 1946 were war veterans. They were not 17 or 18 years old, and they had seen some things. But in 1946, they were issued to that table that I talked about earlier and told, you will wear told by someone who was probably younger than them, I'm a junior, you will wear this freshman beanie or get in trouble. And firsthand, some of you knew Warren Corman, rest in peace. He tells the story of these war veterans saying, I'd like to see you come back from behind that table and try and put that beanie on my head. It is not happening, and you can go stuff it. I'm not wearing a freshman beanie, and that multi-decade tradition disappeared in 1946. The reason I love telling that story is not just because it is an example of how students are really the ones who are in charge of our traditions, can create them, can delete them, can edit them. But I chose for the picture on the cover of my book, clearly some students enjoying themselves at an athletic event, but also a picture of commencement. It happens to be the picture of commencement 1950. Why is that important and why does it relate to the beanie story? Because if my math is right, that's 4 years later. And many of our 1946 freshmen were graduating in 1950. And you all know that the Campanile, in all of its glory, it was constructed as a memorial to those we lost in World War II. I'll try and come back to the war memorials. That's an interesting campus story as well. But in only 4 short years, we had a beautiful bell tower to memorialize those we lost in World War II. So those 1946 freshmen were graduating in 1950, and they were gathering at the top of the hill, which they had done since the early 20s when Memorial Stadium was built. And they said, this is our memorial. We lost friends, and we were in that war. I don't know if you can see it from back there, but the Campanile is under construction. This is scaffolded, and it was not completed. It was not, they didn't do a grand opening. Can't think of the right word. That's okay. Dedicated, it was, thank you. It was not dedicated until the following year. But literally, these students who were graduating, who had come to KU in 1946, pushed that scaffolding out of the way and specifically walked through it before they walked down the hill. This photo is the genesis image of walking through the Campanile to begin your walk down the hill for commencement. Why is that important? I cannot imagine another class of KU students who killed one tradition and created another. And I would argue this is one of our most important non-athletic traditions. So cool. How did that start? The image of the Jayhawk with the beanie. Okay, so thank you for that. Really lovely. What I enjoy more than many things is figuring out how these got created. You know, I mean, number one, we all want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and how lucky we are to have KU as one of those things. But also, the traditions just mean so much more if we understand how they started, and why we get to maintain them. So I've got another one that is related to something that Becky mentioned, and that was the evolution of the Jayhawks is 6 Jayhawks. I do not think it's 7. Some of you would argue that perhaps the 2005-2006 Jayhawk is the last of the evolution. Do you remember why that was considered a new bird in 05-06? Are you paying attention?
Color change.
So there were some, what I would consider minor upgrades, updates, technological things, but really the font was the big one. And some of you were with us on campus back then, some of you weren't. It was quite a heated
Yes.
discussion and event, and it is the beginning of my story about the wild and rather unbelievable connection between University of Kansas and the state of Pennsylvania. That's really weird. Here we go. So the question first was, holy cow, we've got a lot of Jayhawks. I mean, there's a whole beautiful book about the different kinds of Jayhawks. Even in the early 2000s, you had the aerospace engineering, flying Jayhawk. You had the libraries had its own Jayhawk. The School of Music had its own Jayhawk. And, you know, frankly, I think most of us thought that was okay. That was okay. The people in charge who were trying to manage our trademark and our image and our branding, understandably, were a little concerned about that. The branding experts say that if you have too many of your brand, you're diluting the brand. Don't do that. And, you know, they said, look at Kleenex, look at Elevator, look at all of these brands that became ubiquitous. At least that's the word they used. I don't know what that means. So I remember clearly, and some of you remember David Johnston was the lamb to slaughter in all of this. Please collect all of the different versions of the Jayhawk. And we are going to have some very serious conversations about our image, our branding. And we even hired a consultant. So the consultant was expensive. We'll get back to that. But the real challenge, I don't know if we really want to get too deep into this, but I got the microphone. Put yourself in the shoes of faculty, in fact, of research faculty that were going to these professional conventions and conferences and giving a business card, which some of them felt had a cartoon character on it. I want to present myself professionally from the University of Kansas. Can we please put the seal on my business card? No. Why not? Because it is religious. I'm okay with that. We are not. Can I put the campanile on my? No. Well, why not? Well, I mean, it's neat, but it's not our official image. So the consultants were brought in to tell us what we didn't want to tell each other. They were paid $80,000, and they came up with this. Right there. $80,000. Okay, now that is not judgment, and I'll help you understand why I don't think so. Because once it was completed, now understand, this is not a cartoon character, this is not religious, this is hard to argue against, but it's kind of vanilla. I mean, I like the idea that it's the hill, and I don't think people see that. I digress. So now with this spectacular book, you understand that this is the hill. And okay, so public media got a hold of the fact that this cost $80,000, and then some ambitious young reporter found a small school in Pennsylvania. Say it louder. Kutztown University, that had this as their logo. They already had it, and you know what? They paid $5,000 for it. So this story has a happy ending, and it's so mascot and Jayhawk related that I kind of enjoy telling it. Yes, Kutztown University already had this as their logo. They paid a fraction of what we paid, but a part of our $80,000 bill was a trademark and copyright search, and they came up with nothing. Why didn't they find Kutztown? Because they hadn't protected their mark. University of Kansas could have said, you got to change your mark. We did not do that because we're cooler than that. But it kind of squelched this notion that we wasted our money, and Kutztown still has that mark, and so do we. And we live together happily because that's the way it should be. but unique and interesting, the fact that it already existed and the reason that it was okay for us to invest this kind of money into the project was the consultants knew that these were things that needed to be done. So is that what the connection is between KU and Pennsylvania? Not even close. We talked about the fact that no other university has a Jayhawk as a mascot. And I'm tempted to pull it up, but I'm going to ask you to do it yourselves. If you go to the thriving metropolis of Jeannette, Pennsylvania, and pull up their school board website, you will discover that it is the Jeannette Jayhawks, and their mascot looks exactly like this without the KU in the middle. And it has since the mid-1940s. So as I understand it, now we used, one of the KU Rotary Clubs meets just down the street at Maselli's, and we had a fellow named Mike Getho as a member. He passed not long ago, but he had a brother who was a young assistant coach for the University of Kansas football team in the 40s. When was this guy created?
46.
See, they were listening and they said 1946. So this fellow goes back to, I believe, his hometown of Jeannette, Pennsylvania, to be their football coach, and says, if you guys are looking for a mascot, we just created this thing and it's kind of cool, let's use it. So almost as long as our current Jayhawk has been around, it has been the mascot for Jeannette, Pennsylvania's public school, primarily their high school. Is that what's the connection between KU and Pennsylvania? That's not it. That's part of it. The rock chalk chant, arguably as important as the Jayhawk in our traditions. There is an even weirder story about a student finishing their undergrad at the University of Kansas and going to the University of Pittsburgh for dental school. This person's class, it was a female student, she got together with her group and they went to all of the Pittsburgh football games and decided their group needed a cheer. So literally, for, I want to say it was 20 years, I think it was 70s and 80s, you could go to the stadium, the University of Pittsburgh Stadium, and you would hear, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, go Pitt Dental. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. So just really, all these things did not make it into my book. Maybe there's another one.
Either.
Right,
Why did I
right.
know
So,
these things?
well, what happens, and you'll back me up on this, we come up with these stories and we put them on the chalkboard, and some of them aren't that great, and so they don't make it into the book. But then we publish the book and find out all the other stuff that really should have been in the book. I have only one. I also want to really make sure. So we're at 8 o'clock. I definitely want to make sure that you all have a chance for questions, and our thousands of people that are streaming this program have a chance for questions. But I want to throw at you some very specific KUMU facts, some of which you already know. Okay, where was Fog Allen from? Missouri. How did he choose to come to the University of Kansas? There is a really lovely biography about Fog Allen, simply entitled Fog. Came out about 10 years ago. It's a pretty thick book, so it really goes in depth. And one of his quotes is, I came to Lawrence one weekend and the streets were cleaner than they were in Columbia. And it's actually a quote where he was asked, how did you choose? And that was one of the reasons. Well, I agree with that. So of course, just the town is so much more lovely and wonderful. So much more. But then, he still had connections back home. And as many of you know, he came and he played basketball under James Naismith for 1 year. 1 year. He said famously, I'm tired of losing. I think we need to work on some drills. We need some offensive practice. And Naismith said, not into this coaching thing. I mean, he really wanted his players to make their own decisions. This was his game was meant to build character, to build leadership skills and teamwork. And so he kind of let him go. And Fogg wasn't okay with that. He actually was granted a position at Baker as head basketball coach, Haskell as head basketball coach, and then for 1 year, all three, Baker, Haskell, and KU's basketball coach. Very quickly learned that one of the challenges for winning basketball games was all the injuries. We're dealing with that this season, aren't we? So Fogg Allen says, I'm going to get an osteopathy degree. I'm going to go back to Missouri and get it. And he began coaching basketball and practicing osteopathy. And as the story goes, it's such a Missouri story. There were folks on the board of the school, I can't remember which, Northeast, West, South Missouri State University, who were doctors and were less than pleased with the fact that this young fellow was taking their patients and trying to solve all of their problems through osteopathy. And they said, Fogg Allen, you may either coach or practice medicine. And he said, I want to do both, so I'm going somewhere else. So here's another thing that I want you to get out of this. Fogg Allen says, I'm going to go interview for the head basketball coaching position at Kansas State University. And he interviewed for it and they chose someone else. Now, fast forward a few years. Anyone remember Norm Stewart?
Yeah.
Coach of the University of Missouri basketball team. Sit down, Norm. And didn't we give him a rocking chair for the very last, so he finally sat down? Well, Norm retired and the University of Missouri needed a new basketball coach. And they interviewed a few folks and they chose Quinn Snyder, but who was one of the people they interviewed? Bill Self. So again, our two biggest rivals with two of the most boring mascots in the country could have had Fogg Allen or Bill Self as their head basketball coach, but their leadership was not as educated and intelligent as the University of Kansas, and so we got these extraordinary coaches. One last thing I want to offer, and then I would love for both of us to take some questions. When I ran KU Info, the only reason it went well was that I hired some really spectacular students. And they wanted to dig into some of these stories, some of the statistics, some of the enrollment numbers, etc. And I had a group of 3 of them that said, Coach Self has just been inducted into the Hall of Fame. And that means 5 of our 8 men's basketball coaches are in the Hall of Fame. Now, I mean, one of them is who the Hall of Fame is named after. And actually, he's not in as a coach, he's in as a contributor, right? Because he wasn't a great coach, but he was rather important to the game. So 5 of our 8 men's basketball coaches are in the Hall of Fame. That's what, around 63%. So these 3 students said, how good is that compared to other schools? What other schools have 63 or more % of their coaches in the Hall of Fame? So they did a very in-depth study. I saved all of the scribbles and chicken scratches that they did. And I'm here to tell you the number 2 school that they found. Now, of course, you have to have very few coaches and several really, really good ones. The second place school had 25% of their coaches in the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
We just kill it. We kill it. And it's because, in part, Fogg Allen decided coaching was an important part of the game of basketball, and he and several others are in the Hall of Fame. Some other fun stories about KUMU, I'll save them because we officially have 15 to 20 minutes left, and I want Becky to come back up and we can take some of your questions.
We have a question from online. How do you see KU traditions evolving over the next decade?
Please tell them we only have 20 minutes left.
We have a KU student here.
Ah, yes.
Dominic, do you see any traditions coming? Because that's where a lot of them come, they come from the students.
I think you should answer it first. And then-
They come from the students themselves. And I don't really know, I'm not part of the university anymore. I don't see them on I'm not walking around on campus, but I don't know whether the technology is gonna have a big,
There you go.
part of all this. Okay, bye, you guys.
This student has a test tomorrow.
Let me talk about the technology.
Yeah.
So that's a very intricate question. I mean, the reason that KU is better than all these other schools is that they all claim to have unique history and they all claim to have unique traditions, but ours are actually the best. And so the reason that a tradition becomes so solid and important is that it remains for generations. And the seniors teach the freshmen, and then they become seniors. But they will always change. The rock chalk hasn't changed. This guy hasn't changed for 80 years. However, Becky says it right. Technology changes things. I was lucky enough to be in one of the very first camping groups for Allen Fieldhouse basketball. And this was before cell phones, believe it or not. The cars had just been invented. And what happened was we were in the field house 2 hours before the games and had to do something, but we did not have the phone to entertain us. And now my season tickets are right next to the student section. And this is not a judgment on anyone, but the phone is the primary, gets a lot of attention. And so 2 hours can go by like that because you can do your homework, you can chat with your parents, you can do so many things. So some traditions that are on campus, non-athletic, some that are athletic, they are being changed by the fact that we have a computer in our hand. I can't come up with any that we have lost because of that. We really don't want to get into AI and how that's changing. This is my 31st year as an employee of the university and my first year as a full-time faculty person. And I'm a little worried about the ability of our phones to create content. How is that content going to help us teach people to be critical thinkers, to be creative? It's still going to happen because I remember when we thought the internet was going to destroy the world. But to maybe answer the question, the traditions will remain because it's one of the reasons the school is better than all the others. But they will evolve. They have to evolve. The Kansas Union is less active than it was even just 10 years ago. We can blame COVID for that a little bit, but really the union is where the 500 registered student organizations are housed, are headquartered, and we still have that many, but they are connecting through their phones and their laptops more so than they are gathering in the union. Anschutz Library is not that old. It was built in the 90s, and they've gone through 2 major strategic changes because the first one was the library annex was built, and so the books that were not being checked out went to the annex, and so the stacks were slowly disappearing, and so they said, let's create study spaces. So these cool desks that had all these computers were put together. Well, and now you've got your laptop, you don't need that computer. And so the question is, this place is starting to look like a union. So how are we going to change or evolve? Steve has the answer.
I have an answer, I've got a question. I was intrigued by your story of agency in 46 and 50. were those returning from the war.
Yes.
Jettisoned in one case and added a tradition. So when you think of other times when students had agency, whether it was the anti-war movement, women's movement, were there changes in traditions that occurred in association with those times where there was a peak engagement?
I can think of one, but I want to give Becky a chance to talk about it as well. I remember Ted Owens claiming that their 71 basketball team created unity where on campus there was less than usual. And he said it much more eloquently than I. But this is an example of civil rights protests,
Right.
anti-war protests, and the campus, not just KU, but of course all over the country, major unrest. And that was one of Ted Owens' 2 Final Four teams. And he really felt as though, and I think it may have been Chalmers who also quoted saying, we've got a lot of unhappy students, faculty, staff, and for a brief moment during the year, we were all able to come together and cheer on a team. You want to tackle agency? Do we have other online
If Becky would
questions?
like to add something to that, by all means.
A couple of things that occurred to me is that one of the things that when you first, came out of class, you would go get the UDK. And that isn't really I don't know, do they print it at all, or do they have just 1 or 2 issues?
Right.
They print it for basketball games. It has
So
an
that they can-
online presence.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think it's still called the University Daily Kansan.
Mhm.
And yet I think it was presented weekly for a while.
Which is not a big surprise, that it's online. And then another thing I was thinking of was not necessarily the agency thing, but I did want to take a little bit of exception to the not to the James Naismith comments about the losingest coach. One thing that he had to tackle was the fact that the court that they were playing on had columns. It was in old snow.
Yeah.
And it was very low. The ceilings were very low. And one time I don't know how he actually did this, but he discovered that there was 3 more feet underground. And so they lowered the floor of old snow so that it was a little bit easier to play basketball. But anyway, that's a little.
I actually agree totally with that. Go ahead.
And also I want to say that in the union, I bought this, I almost brought it tonight, I did, this wooden plaque that has 7.
Yeah.
But they don't date the 2005,
Okay.
which I thought was interesting. Why didn't they do that? Let's see, was there anything else? And what was your question really?
I was just thinking of those moments when you gave a great example of students returning from the war who had great agency given their experience. And there are other moments with the civil rights, women's movement, anti-war movements where students exhibited agency too. And I wondered if there were any traditions that were adjusted in response to that.
Yeah, one thing I noticed too is that now they're going to tear down more buried student housing. Was it ever married students?
Sunflower,
Yeah.
so Stouffer Place was torn down, but Sunflower Apartments, I'm not sure whether that was
They're
ever,
considered to be.
but you're
married
right,
students.
I mean,
But that's, yeah, those are going.
that's right. Yeah, I was worried that I had misspoken, but you taking offense to the notion that he was a losing coach, we're totally on the same page. Old Snow Hall.
Every time people say that, I just go.
The basement of Snow was where he introduced basketball. It had an 11-foot basement ceiling, which I think is fantastic for a basement, but terrible for a basketball. So he did in fact have 3 feet dug out so that it was a better and that building was condemned 20 years later. And there's nowhere that says it was because of basketball, but I think it
Yeah.
was.
And then they built Robinson.
It's also important, and in my defense, I did mention this. He created the game for young people as an activity, right? And he wanted them to figure things out and to become a team and to create leadership skills. He was not he was so disinterested in coaching that in his autobiography, he described many games where he served as the referee. And Roy Williams was quoted as saying, I heard that Dr. Naismith was the ref, and if I ever got to do that, we'd be undefeated.
Well, and one time he told Fogg, Fogg, you don't coach basketball, you play basketball.
The notion of agency is a really important message that some of the faculty try to instill in the students. Many of you are coming here leaving home for the first time and having your entire life been encouraged to think a certain way or to at least grow and mature in a way that your parents or your friends or your teachers think you should. And now we're bringing you to a college setting and asking you to make up your mind on your own. And that attracts people that want to help you make up your mind in certain ways. And so one of the agency elements was the creation of Wesco Hall, taking out Robinson and Hayworth, I think, were the two buildings that had to be torn down for Wesco, and then the front of the building becomes a beach, and it becomes a very popular place for presentations of all kinds, right? Of all kinds, and we use those as case studies in class a lot because there are some that are rather easy to judge as inappropriate, but all of them are meant to challenge your beliefs and either make them stronger because, holy cow, you're crazy and I don't agree with anything you're saying, or just to say, well, I never thought of it that way. A very important part of college, and that's something that I hope doesn't change.
Mhm.
That is a tradition for universities that has to remain the same, because it's rather magical that we take, one of my friends says, snot-nosed 17-year-old high school grads. I don't know that I should quote him, but in any case, and turns them into, these contributors to society who have learned critical thinking and have expanded their perspective. It's magic, and it just needs to continue, that's all.
All right. Thank you.